What's up, everybody? Welcome back to a new episode of Classically Music. If you are new to this channel, welcome. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new classical music educational content. Many of you may think that classical music is dominated by men, which I think is justifiable, especially since some of the most famous composers that we know of are men. But did you know that there also is a plethora of female composers that you may have not heard of? Namely, Clara V Schumann. She was one of classical music's most famous composers, and especially the Romantic era's most famous composers. She was both a pianist and a composer. When I first came across Clara V Schumann, I delved deep into my research about her, and what I found was absolutely fascinating. Born on September 13th, 1819 in Leipzig, Germany, Clara began her piano training with her dad at the age of 5 years old, and she was heavily inspired by her mom, who was also a performer. Clara was a child prodigy. She mesmerized audiences everywhere she went, especially in Vienna. She was such an excellent performer that she was awarded by the Emperor of Vienna, or Emperor of Austria himself, one of Austria's greatest honors, the Royal and Imperial Chamber Virtuosa Award. He competed with composers such as Franz Liszt and Anton Rubinstein because of how great of a performer she was. Some of you may have heard about Clara in the context of her life with her husband, Robert Schumann. It's important to understand the dynamics of their relationship because it had a huge implication on her life. She first met Robert when she was 9 years old, when he moved into their household as a boarding student and started taking lessons with her dad. He was initially pursuing a law career, but then ditched that for a career in music instead. The couple spent so much time as kids, and they soon fell in love with each other as adults. However, her father didn't approve of this relationship, and he went into extreme lengths to prevent the union of the two. She finally broke free from her father in 1840 and decided to marry Robert. Things would take a dark turn, and she would soon go in and out of courts with her father, fighting over assets. She was devastated that the father she thought loved her for who she was would go to such extreme lengths to make her unhappy. Despite that, her marriage to Robert was one of the best things that happened to her in her lifetime. The couple completed each other. She was Robert's muse. He composed music inspired by her. At times, would say that she lived to perform her husband's pieces, and she would always be excited to play the new compositions that he made. It's interesting to note that Robert wasn't very well known at the time, outside of Leipzig and Dresden, but it was Clara who eventually made him famous. She did not stop her musical career for the sake of her marriage to Robert. And Robert was very encouraging. He kept on pushing her to keep on performing, going on concert tours, but he would oftentimes miss her. She was excellent at juggling marital, household, childcare, and, of course, her musical career. Did I forget to mention that she had 8 kids with Robert, but unfortunately, one of them died. In 1853, Clara and Robert crossed paths with Johannes Brahms, who you may know of because of this. He was a musical genius. Things, again, started to take a darker path. Robert started to experience more mental episodes. He started to experience depression, anxiety, hallucinations, and more, to the extent that he attempted to take his own life. And after that, he was admitted into a mental asylum. He would spend the remainder of his life, which were 2.5 years, in the asylum. And Clara was discouraged from visiting her husband because she would potentially trigger more mental episodes by her husband because she would remind him of the past. She was devastated because she went from seeing her husband full-time to not seeing him anymore. She found extreme solace around the gentlemen around her, especially Johannes Brahms, who would take care of the kids sometimes, and of course, composing music. Had it not been for music and composing music, she would not have been able to overcome her grief. In 1856, Robert passed away. Clara was overcome by more grief, but she was content at the same time that her husband was finally relieved from all of his pain. But now she had another problem. She was a widow with 8 kids to feed. She had to quickly reassess her priorities and go back to pursuing her musical career full-time. She was such a strong, persistent, and dedicated woman that she refused to be undercompensated and underpaid compared to other performers and pianists because she knew that they would never stand a chance against her. She was really, really good. In 1878, Clara decided to reduce the number of public engagements she had and decided to take on a faculty position in Frankfurt. The memories of her past started to haunt her. Her illnesses, her marriage to Robert, his tragic death, the strained relationship with her father, her arm injury, and not to mention that she also experienced mental illnesses such as depression and anxiety, but had to suppress them because of society at the time. She gave her final performance in 1891, and a few years later, in March of 1896, she suffered a stroke and passed away a few months later. She desired to be buried next to her husband because she expressed that at times her love for her husband was even more important than her musical and artistic work. Bonus fact, did you know that Clara, despite being pregnant 8 times, did not stop performing, and between 1840 and 1856 performed around 139 times? And finally, you may have heard this rumor that Clara and Brahms had a romantic relationship. It's unclear, especially that she found solace in him when she was at her lowest point. So some may conflict that with the idea of her having a romantic relationship with him, but we'll never know. So that was it. I hope you find this video educational and insightful. Make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you could create as much awareness about classical music as possible. Thanks so much, and see you next time. Bye!